Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that something has been stolen from you while you slept. Not your money, not your memories, not your body, but something infinitely more valuable.
The sovereignty of your mind. Do you feel it? That stab in your chest, that vertigo running down your spine, that terrible suspicion that you are no longer the architect of your thoughts, but just a confused guest in your own head. Maybe you think I'm exaggerating, but look closely. When was the last time you had a thought that wasn't whispered to you from a screen? When was the last time you had the courage to stay alone with your conscience without fleeing into the refuge of the trivial? Coldly observe the grotesque spectacle your mind has become. A fairground of cheap stimuli, a carnival of hollow images, a landfill of other people's opinions that you consume under the illusion of being informed. Doesn't it seem disturbing that every day you wake up with your mind already contaminated before you even set foot on the floor? Let me tell you something you don't want to know. Your anxiety, your chronic fatigue, that feeling that nothing is ever enough. These are not coincidences. They are the symptoms of a culture that has turned your brain into a field of exploitation. You have been taught to confuse speed with intelligence, noise with relevance, accumulation with wisdom. But it's all a farce, a gigantic pantomime designed to keep you docile, obedient, and permanently entertained. If you still think I'm exaggerating, answer honestly. Why are you so afraid of silence? Why does slowness make you uncomfortable? Why do you feel the compulsive need to check your phone every few minutes, as if emptiness were an enemy that must be crushed? Because your mind has been domesticated by a system that profits from your distraction and thrives on your ignorance. What you feel right now, this chill you can't tell is fear or recognition, is the first crack in the wall. The beginning of something that few have the courage to face. The suspicion that you have been relinquishing your clarity for years without putting up any resistance. Can you see it? The price of this toxic comfort is your freedom, and no one is going to give it back to you unless you claim it. Today, I'm going to tell you the truth that was never taught in school, nor whispered in those self-help tutorials. A truth so uncomfortable, you'd rather not hear it. We live in a time when the human mind is being consciously demolished. Not with bullets or shackles, but with distractions. With stimuli designed to saturate you until your ability to think critically is reduced to a feeble skeleton. But before we go on, answer yourself sincerely. Why does distraction attract you so much? Why does every day of your life seem like a flight with no destination? Why does the idea of facing your own thoughts feel unbearable? If you dare to look straight on, you'll discover the root of this collective collapse. We are not in an information crisis. We are in an epidemic of superficiality. Clarity is the only antidote, but also the hardest to obtain, because it involves something almost no one is willing to do. Stop. Silence the noise. Look in the mirror and ask yourself with brutal honesty, what part of me is still alive under all this digital garbage? Let me warn you, what you are about to discover is not comfortable. After hearing these words, you may never see your world the same way again. Something inside you may resist with all its strength, because this message is not designed to please you, but to wake you up. If you've made it this far, maybe part of you already suspects that something is irreparably broken. But the most disturbing thing is not the fracture of your mind. What's truly chilling is that this decay does not happen only to you. It's collective. A carefully cultivated mental illness disguised as progress. Because while everyone applauds immediacy and celebrates the overload of useless data, No one stops to ask, what are we losing in this orgy of distraction? Let me tell you something that very few dare to say. Every time you consume without filtering, every time you confuse information with knowledge, you are feeding a void that can never be satisfied. And that void is not harmless. It grows. It expands within you like a corrosive stain that slowly dissolves your identity. This is how the ecosystem works. The less you think, the more you're molded. The more you react, the less you decide. You become an emotional puppet that confuses impulses with purpose. But there is something even more perverse in this picture. You have been made to believe that all this mental exhaustion is a sign of productivity. Anxiety has been normalized as if it were the inevitable bill of modernity. Chronic fatigue is presented as a medal proving your commitment. No one explains to you that living with a mind on fire is not a sign of engagement, but of slavery. Doesn't it seem suspicious to you that deep thinking has been banished from public spaces? Before, reflection was a prestigious act. Now it is almost a stigma. We are surrounded by people who pride themselves on questioning nothing. They proclaim themselves authentic while regurgitating the same slogans over and over. Authenticity has become a disguise for mental laziness because it is much easier to repeat than to investigate, much more comfortable to react than to reason. And meanwhile, intelligence withers, suffocated under tons of ephemeral content. Want me to tell you another uncomfortable truth? The culture of distraction doesn't just infect your ability to think. It also robs you of something even more delicate, your capacity to feel deeply. When everything happens at the speed of a flash, when every stimulus competes for your attention like a desperate salesman, sensitivity becomes a luxury no one allows themselves. When was the last time you experienced something without the urge to share it? When did you feel gratitude, sadness, or awe without thinking of someone else's approval? Excess stimuli not only cancels clarity, it also corrupts emotion. And here comes the most twisted part. While you believe this saturation is an inevitable symptom of the digital age, there are those who profit from your deterioration. Entire industries thrive on your mental fatigue. Every second you spend consuming distraction, someone is monetizing your fractured attention. You are the product, even if you think you are the customer. And the merchandise you offer is not your money. It's your consciousness. It's not just about social media or entertainment platforms. It's a much vaster network, a machine designed to keep you trapped in a state of chronic confusion. The more exhausted you are, the easier it is for you to buy whatever promises momentary relief. That endless series, that mediocre tutorial, that app promising you discipline. It's all part of a closed circuit where mental exhaustion is recycled and resold as a necessity. Do you see it now? This is not a historical accident. It's a mass-scale experiment. And you are the guinea pig, because while you're busy putting out emotional fires, your ability to question the system that causes them fades away. The trap is so perfect you don't even suspect it exists. Look at yourself honestly. Do you really believe you are free when your mind depends on constant doses of cheap dopamine? Can you call it autonomy when every silence becomes a threat? They have turned distraction into a refuge, mediocrity into a value, and speed into a dogma. And so, while you celebrate immediacy, your inner world is slowly consumed in a fire no one can see. But not all is lost. Even if it's hard to imagine, there's still a small group of individuals who refuse to bow to this dictatorship of the superficial. People who understand that thinking is an act of resistance, that slowness is a revolutionary virtue, that silence, the one you so fear, is the space where ideas that can change everything take root. If you've ever felt uncomfortable in this culture of haste, if a part of you resists instant gratification, maybe you are part of that minority. Maybe, deep down, you still preserve the seed of clarity. Don't let it die. Because the world doesn't need more hypnotized consumers. It needs human beings capable of stopping and looking with wide-awake eyes at the absurd theater others call reality. Have you ever wondered what would happen if, suddenly, you disconnected everything? If you turned off every screen, every notification, every stimulus you now feel is indispensable, what would remain? At first, you may feel a primitive terror, an emptiness so intense you'll convince yourself something is wrong with you. But that emptiness is proof you've spent too long feeding your mind with substitutes. Withdrawal is not a failure. It is the first sign you are recovering your capacity to feel and think without intermediaries. Don't fool yourself. Returning to clarity will not be comfortable. It will mean facing every corner of your mind you've been evading with distractions. But it will also give you something no screen can offer. The feeling that for the first time in a long time, you are the owner of your consciousness again. And when that happens, you'll understand that this collective decay is not invincible. That even if millions choose to anesthetize themselves, there will always remain a handful of people willing to think courageously. People who understand that clarity is a form of insurrection, and that in a world that applauds ignorance, daring to face the truth is the most dangerous act of all. But maybe you're wondering why this epidemic of distraction feels so irresistible. Why even knowing it's consuming you, you keep running into its arms? The answer is not just in technology or advertising, it's much deeper. The root is psychological, so intimate it's hard to recognize. You've been taught to distrust your own silence. As a child, you were taught that emptiness is an enemy, that boredom is a sign you're failing, that stillness is a symptom of uselessness. So you grew up believing you are only valuable if you produce, if you react, if you consume. No one explained to you that this urgency is an invisible cage. Notice something hardly anyone analyzes. Perpetual entertainment doesn't just steal your time, it steals your identity. Have you realized you no longer know what you truly like? You confuse your desires with the algorithms pushing you in a specific direction. You think you choose, but you are really being guided by artificial intelligence that knows your impulses better than you do. Every video you consume, every headline you share, every notification you validate is a seed growing in your mind and displacing your own judgment. And meanwhile, your will dissolves into an ocean of options you never asked for. And there's something even more sinister. This culture not only destroys your mental clarity, it nullifies your emotional resilience. When your mind becomes accustomed to constant bombardment, your nervous system stops distinguishing what's important from what's trivial. Everything becomes an alert. Everything disturbs you. Everything demands your immediate reaction. This is how anxiety and chronic exhaustion are born. From living in a state of permanent alarm, never giving yourself permission to stop and discern. The consequence is devastating. An entire generation walks through life convinced that feeling burned out is a sign of commitment, that living with a head full of noise is the price of success. And meanwhile, the truly important questions are buried under tons of distractions. Who are you when no one is watching? What thoughts arise in your mind when there is no stimulus to push them? What purpose would you have if you stopped measuring your worth in terms of productivity and external validation? I'm going to tell you something you won't be taught in any school. The ability to endure silence is a form of intelligence that is becoming extinct. Do you know why? Because silence is the only space the system cannot reach you. There, without screens, without voices, without comparisons, you are free to look at your life with brutal honesty. But it is also there where the questions you fear most appear. Why am I here? What is the meaning of all this? Who do I really belong to? Most people would rather not know the answers, because they would mean dismantling a whole building of inherited certainties. And so we go on, displacing discomfort with stimuli, suffocating curiosity with noise, anesthetizing consciousness with entertainment. Because real thinking hurts, truly feeling is exhausting, and truly being requires a courage that not everyone is willing to cultivate. But there's a secret almost no one confesses. Your mind retains the capacity to rebel, even if it has slept for years. Every time you dare to do something without a screen in front of you, every time you choose slowness, even though everything pushes you to rush, every time you decide to question your impulses, you are rebuilding a muscle they told you was useless. The muscle of clarity. Look around you. Do you see that lost look in the eyes of people glued to their devices? That absent glow, that mechanical gesture with which they swipe their finger again and again across the screen. It's not mere distraction. It's proof we are living in a non-consensual experiment, where every individual is a data point, every thought is a product, and every emotion is a commodity. And if you think I'm exaggerating, ask yourself why it is so uncomfortable to be without distractions. Why that silence weighs on you like guilt. Because in that void, everything you have been postponing reappears. The decisions you didn't make, the conversations you avoided, the versions of yourself you buried under the incessant spectacle of the immediate. But here comes the most uncomfortable detail of all. Even if the whole world lives anesthetized, no one will answer for you the day you realize you've wasted your entire life in a theater of trivialities. No algorithm will bear your regret. No social network will give back the years you spent feeding mediocrity. And then you'll discover that the only way to preserve your dignity is to dare to look where no one else wants to look, the deep well of your own consciousness. And maybe you think this sounds too dramatic. But tell me, isn't it tragic that most human beings would rather live anesthetized than awake? Isn't it a tragedy that clarity has become an almost exotic privilege? We're not talking about something trivial. We're talking about the only tool that will allow you to get through this time of mental decline without completely losing yourself. And if you still have a trace of will, if you still have a remnant of inner pride, listen carefully. This world doesn't need more docile consumers. It doesn't need more slaves to easy stimulus. It needs human beings who dare to rebuild the mind. People capable of valuing silence as a sacred space. Individuals willing to withstand the vertigo of freedom without fleeing. Because if it isn't you, if it isn't us, who will be left to remind this age that intelligence does not die as long as someone dares to think? And maybe you wonder what's the point of resisting if everything around you seems designed to push you back into lethargy. The answer is brutally simple. Because surrender is not harmless. Because every time you decide not to question, you're giving up something you'll never get back. Let me tell you something few dare to admit. The conscious renunciation of clarity is not neutral. It has a cost. And that cost is your ability to experience life fully. Think about it coldly. When your mind is colonized by urgency, what space is left for curiosity? When every moment is programmed to distract you, what space survives for contemplation? Maybe you don't notice it, but that perpetual hurry is stealing something that used to be considered sacred. The chance to discover yourself without the interference of someone else's narrative. Have you realized that every time an uncomfortable thought arises, your immediate reflex is to seek refuge in distraction. It doesn't matter if it's a silly video, a trivial conversation, or an endless stream of empty headlines. The essential thing is not to be left alone with that discomfort. Because in that uncomfortable silence live the questions you fear the most. Am I living according to my values or to the expectations of others? What is the meaning of what I do every day? Why have I allowed my mind to become a container of emotional garbage? And here appears another nuance no one wants to discuss. Chronic distraction not only impoverishes your thinking, it also incapacitates you for deep commitment. Because everything that's truly worthwhile in this life, genuine friendship, love that grows slowly, true learning, requires time and sustained attention. But if your mind has gotten used to jumping from stimulus to stimulus, how are you going to sustain anything that doesn't provide instant gratification? The irony is that the deeper you dive into this fast and superficial consumption, the more that sense of emptiness grows. A void you try to fill with more stimuli, more urgency, more distraction. And though on the surface it may seem you're surrounded by endless options, in reality your experience is getting poorer every day because everything happens on the surface, without roots, without depth, without memory. Maybe you don't want to hear it, but this is the real price of your unconditional surrender to the culture of the fleeting, the progressive inability to sustain wonder. Do you remember when you were a child, and you could be fascinated for hours by an idea, an object, a landscape? When was the last time you felt that unadulterated curiosity? That faculty didn't disappear by accident. It was eroded by years of constant stimulus, by the mechanical repetition of content designed to keep your attention captive, but sterile. And now comes the most uncomfortable question of all. Who benefits from you living like this? Who is interested in your being unable to commit to anything that can't be resolved in a handful of seconds? It's not hard to see if you dare to look with perspective. A mind that can't stand silence, that doesn't cultivate doubt, that doesn't know how to stop, is an easy mind to domesticate. There's no need to censor it with violence because it censors itself with its own rush. So while you believe you move freely, that you consume because you want to, that you decide because you can, you're really walking down a hallway others built for you. A hallway full of doors that all open with the same promise, to relieve your discomfort. But behind each door, you only find more sophisticated versions of the same emptiness. And if you've made it this far without running away, if something inside you beats with the sense that you deserve more than this superficial existence, then listen closely. You're still in time to recover what you lost. But you'll have to pay a price most aren't willing to pay. The radical discomfort of feeling again, of thinking again, of looking at yourself without anesthesia. Because even if no one has told you, clarity is not a gift. It's conquered. It's not a state that happens by accident, but a discipline that is trained. It takes courage. It takes patience. It requires accepting that for a time, you'll feel a vertigo so intense you'll doubt yourself. Because after years of numbness, awakening is a brutal experience. But it's also the only experience that can give you back something you thought was impossible. The sovereignty of your mind. The ability to decide what you focus your attention on. The freedom to dissent when everyone around you repeats. The dignity to build your own thoughts even if you're branded as strange. And when you experience that awakening, even for an instant, you'll understand you were never just another consumer. That there has always been an intact intelligence inside you, waiting for you to have the courage to rescue it from the mud of the trivial. That intelligence is still there, more alive than ever, ready to rebuild your consciousness from the ashes. But no one can do it for you. No one can give you back your capacity for wonder if you are not willing to let go of the weight of distraction. No one can teach you to think if you deny yourself silence. And no one, absolutely no one, will be able to offer you the clarity you so long for if you don't dare to face the most uncomfortable truth of all, that this world is designed so that you never discover it. And if right now you feel something twisting inside you, if you perceive an echo of discomfort mixed with a spark of determination, then stay. Because this could be the beginning of the only revolution that matters, the one that happens inside your own mind. And if you have endured up to this point, if you are still here without looking away or seeking refuge in another stimulus, then you are different. Because most can't stand this conversation. Most run away, close the window, swipe the finger, and look for a placebo that will return them to comfort. But not you. You decided to stay. And that means that inside you, something still survives that this system has not been able to domesticate. The longing for truth. Maybe right now you notice an uncomfortable silence enveloping your thoughts. Don't try to fill it. Listen to it. That silence is proof that you are alive inside, that your consciousness is still hungry for something that cannot be bought or downloaded. Meaning. And here, in this strange and brutal pause, I want you to ask yourself something very few dare to consider. What if all this emptiness you feel is not a defect, but a sign that you are ready to start again? What if this discomfort is the invitation you've been waiting for all these years? Because there is one certainty that no one can ever take from you. Clarity is contagious. A single mind that dares to wake up can sow doubts in hundreds of sleeping minds. Maybe you don't know it, but the simple act of thinking deeply is a form of rebellion that spreads like wildfire. And if you're here, it's because you sense the fire has already started to ignite inside you. You don't need to have all the answers. No one does. All you need is to keep the courage to question, the bravery not to give in when mediocrity comes disguised as success, the patience to withstand silence until better questions arise than those you inherited, and, above all, the humility to understand that the mind is built every day like a muscle that grows stronger with discomfort and wonder. So if today you decide something, let it not be to return to distraction. Decide to stay with your own vertigo. Decide to observe it with curiosity instead of running away. Decide to start living with the awareness that your attention is the most valuable thing you possess, and that as long as you keep cultivating that inner space, no one can make you another slave of this age that celebrates ignorance and crucifies clarity. Now I want to propose a small symbolic act. If everything you've just heard has resonated with you, if you feel something inside you has been stirred, write me in the comments a phrase that is your own declaration of resistance. It can be simple, it can be raw, it can be uncomfortable. But let it be yours, because that will be the first stone in your reconstruction. And if you want to keep exploring ideas that unsettle and awaken, subscribe. Here you won't find easy recipes or hollow promises, only one commitment: to question every lie you were sold as truth. Because sometimes, to start living, you have to dare to lose everything, even the comfort of not thinking. See you on the next mental journey. But in the meantime, remember this: every time you choose silence over noise, every time you dare to feel without distraction, every time you think for yourself, you are reclaiming your sovereignty. And that, even if the world doesn't understand it, is the most revolutionary act there is. Now turn off the screen. Stay for a moment with your own mind. Let it speak to you without interference. And when vertigo scares you, smile. It's the sign that you're finally waking up.